It all started the day we gathered to hear the reading of my grandmother's will, a moment we expected to be solemn but peaceful. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that hangs heavy before a storm. I remember the air feeling thick, like every breath was laced with unspoken tension. We sat in the old living room, the same room where countless family celebrations had taken place, now turned into an arena of uncertainty. My grandmother had always been the glue of our family, the quiet force keeping us together despite our differences. But as the lawyer began to speak, that glue seemed to dissolve in an instant. The terms were unexpected. Some of us were left out entirely, while others were handed more than anyone anticipated. Eyes darted around the room, searching for justification, for some hidden meaning behind the words on that paper. I watched as my uncle's face darkened, his jaw clenched tightly. He had always been the one who claimed to understand grandmother best, yet the will didn't reflect that. Instead, it seemed to favor my cousin, a quiet girl many of us barely knew. Whispers started to ripple through the room, each family member wrestling with shock and disbelief. At first, we tried to keep the peace, convincing ourselves that it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe the lawyer had misspoken, or that there was another document yet to be revealed. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew roots quickly, feeding on years of old grievances and sibling rivalries. The next days were a blur of hushed phone calls and strained conversations. Old wounds reopened as accusations began flying, claims of favoritism, of manipulation, even of foul play. It was as if the love we all thought we shared was an illusion, easily shattered by the lure of inheritance. I found myself caught in the middle, trying to mediate while feeling my own heart fracture. The family dinners became battlegrounds, with every word weighed and every glance loaded with suspicion. The warmth that once filled the room was replaced by cold calculation and guarded silence. One evening, my sister confronted me in the kitchen, her voice trembling not just with anger, but with a deep sadness I hadn't seen before. She accused me of siding with our cousin, blaming me for the growing divide. I tried to explain, to remind her that none of us wanted this, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the weight of betrayal. Meanwhile, my cousin withdrew into herself, the sudden attention and hostility wearing her down. She barely spoke during family gatherings, her eyes darting nervously, as if expecting the next attack to come at any moment. It broke my heart to see her like that, so isolated in a family that once promised unconditional love. The lawyer's visits became more frequent, and soon legal counsel was involved. Documents piled up on the dining table, each one a reminder of the conflict tearing us apart. We began to measure every interaction through the lens of legal strategy rather than familial affection. There was a particularly bitter argument over a cherished heirloom, a delicate necklace passed down through generations. What should have been a symbol of our shared history turned into a flashpoint. Voices rose, tears fell, and the necklace was tossed onto the floor, shattering more than just glass. I tried to reason with my family, to remind them of the memories behind those objects, the stories they carried. But it was like talking to ghosts. People changed, hardened by the fight for what they believed was rightfully theirs. The love that had once been the foundation of our family now seemed like a fragile myth. One night, unable to bear the suffocating atmosphere, I stepped outside into the cold air. The house loomed behind me, its windows dark and uninviting. I realized then how much we had lost, not just possessions, but trust and respect. The inheritance had become a battleground where love was the first casualty. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between us grew, both physical and emotional. Invitations stopped coming, phone calls went unanswered. The family I had known was fracturing into separate factions, each convinced they were justified in their bitterness. I found solace in writing, pouring my confusion and pain onto paper. Sometimes it felt like the only way to make sense of the chaos, that somewhere in the words, I could find a path back to some version of peace, or at least understanding. In moments of quiet, I would revisit old photographs, tracing the faces of happier times. It was hard to reconcile those smiles with the cold stares and clenched fists that now defined our interactions. The past felt like a distant dream, one slipping further away with each passing day. Yet despite everything, a small part of me refused to give up hope. I clung to the belief that beneath the anger and hurt, the love was still there, buried, perhaps, but not extinguished. That belief was a fragile lifeline in a sea of bitterness. I wonder now how many families face this same heartbreak, how many inheritances become the catalyst for war rather than a legacy of love. It's a question that haunts me, especially as I watch the slow unraveling of what was once unbreakable. The irony is cruel. What was meant to provide security and continuity has instead revealed our vulnerabilities and fractures. The objects and money represent more than wealth. They symbolize histories and identities intertwined with pain and pride. Even as I write this, the unresolved tension lingers in the air. There are moments when a call or a message might bridge the gap, but often silence wins. The war for inheritance has left scars that no amount of apology or explanation can easily heal. I don't know what the future holds for us, whether we can find a way back to each other or if this conflict will define us forever. What I do know is that love, as powerful as it can be, is sometimes fragile enough to break under pressure. And so this story continues, an ongoing battle where the lines between family and foe blur, and where every choice carries the weight of history and heartbreak alike.